My name is Dr. Cyril H. Wecht. I am a forensic pathologist and also an attorney. I have been practicing forensic pathology since I finished my training in 1962. I have been active doing autopsies to the present time for all of these years. I've done about 21,000 autopsies myself since 1957 when I started my training in pathology, and I have reviewed, supervised, or signed off on about 42,000 additional autopsies. I was the coroner of Allegheny County for 20 years at two separate 10-year periods, and for a brief time the chief medical examiner of Allegheny County. I also write and teach. I have professorial appointments at Duquesne University, University of Pittsburgh Schools of Medicine, and the Graduate School of Public Health, and also at Carlow University. I've written about 640 or so published articles. I have about 45 or 48 books, including multi-volume sets, of which I am the editor or co-editor, author or co-author, including a 5-volume set entitled Forensic Sciences that has been published on a semi-annual basis with supplements since 1982. I have been involved in one capacity or another in the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I've worked on cases involving Elvis Presley, Tammy Wynette, Chandra Levy, Sonny Von Bulow, Gene Harris, Waco Branch Davidian fire. I've been involved with the deaths of JonBenet Ramsey, O.J. Simpson. I continue to be involved in a lot of these cases which remain in question and in controversy even to this day, such as the 3 major political assassinations of JFK, RFK, and MLK. I have reviewed all the records and materials submitted to me involving the death of Ronnie Reuter. The blunt force injuries on Ronnie Reuter's face, in my opinion, are at least a couple of days or older than that. 2 days to maybe 3 or 4 days. These include periorbital ecchymosis, discoloration, what you would call a black eye on the left side of her face. She has some abrasions and contusions on the right side involving the right upper lip, the lower lip, and the chin area. These are not fresh injuries. They are not associated with the gunshot wounds that she sustained and which caused her death. They are separate, independent, and they are definitely older. They had been there for days before Ms. Reuter was killed. So I would say that the black eye, as I've indicated, was 2 to a few days old. This is the colloquial characterization of what we call periorbital ecchymosis, discoloration of the soft tissue surrounding the eye. Definitely not anything related to the gunshot wounds. No manifestation at all of the injuries sustained in her head by the gunshot wound. This is a separate injury, and as I've indicated, clearly days older than the injuries which led to her death. I believe that Ronnie Reuter was in a standing position based upon the trajectory of the bullet, her position, her height, and everything. That bullet, referred to as bullet wound B in my report, entered on the left side of her anterior chest, proceeded toward the left and somewhat backward and somewhat downward. I believe that she was in a standing position when she sustained that gunshot wound of her chest. I have reviewed the report by the Larson Forensics Group. Their conclusion was that Ronnie Reuter would have had to have been shot by someone who was at least about 5 feet 10 inches tall, in order for that bullet to have entered in the fashion and to have moved in the manner that I have described, namely front to back, right to left, and somewhat downward. I agree fully with the analysis and the scenario laid out by the Larson Forensic Science Group. I believe that the person who shot and killed Roine Reuter would have had to have been about 5 feet 10 inches or taller. I do not believe that Marnie Yang, who was only about 5 feet or so, could possibly have inflicted that fatal gunshot wound. There is no way that would have been physically possible. As Ms. Reuter was shot, then she began to turn her body in a counterclockwise fashion to try to avoid more shots, which she did sustain on the right side of her body. And she had been in a standing position. This is not at all consistent with the allegations and charges made against Marnie Yang. Marnie Yang, who is about 5 feet tall, could not have been physically capable of shooting that gunshot wound that entered into Roine Reuter's left upper anterior chest wall, and which moved then backward and slightly to the left and somewhat downward. Marnie Yang, at about 5 feet tall, could not have inflicted that gunshot wound. It would not have been physically possible for her to have done that, as Ms. Reuter stood in a standing position.